Welcome back, APUSH students. Today is a sort of different version of the normal chapter reviews. This is going to be all the New Deal reforms and organizations you're going to have to know. This connects a lot to chapter 32, but I felt like this deserved sort of its own video. And as always, if you don't know the American Pageant, it's fine because the content is still going to be the same. I'm going to be going over all the key terms and notes for this, not chapter, but era that helped me get a 5, so I encourage you to take notes along as well. Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC. It gave young men easy employment on environmental projects to help bail out the unemployed masses. So this is a way to help the people getting affected by the Great Depression, just a way to get jobs and to get put to work and to make a little bit of money. Federal Emergency Relief Administration, or FERA, it distributed $500 million to states to spend on various relief projects and institutions. States were able to use the money to help those in need. So this was basically just a massive national bailout, but instead of directly giving it to the people, they gave it to states because some states had different needs. They were affected differently by the Depression. So the government gave discretion to the states to spend that money how they felt it was best needed for. Homeowners Loan Corporation, the HOLC, helped people to pay off or refinance their mortgages to prevent more people from being foreclosed on. This helped to lower the rates of homelessness to eventually have an easier path to recovery beyond relief. One of the major effects of the Depression was people just couldn't afford to make payments on their homes. And that was creating just this massive rush of homelessness. And in order to get the economy back on track, obviously you need to get people back working, back, consuming in the economy. But how can you do that when you have just a massive homeless population? So that was sort of step number 1, get people back in their homes and feeling some sense of security in their lives. Works Progress Administration, WPA, this is a pretty famous and notable one, created public projects in which employment for the projects was given to those who were unemployed. Beyond unemployment relief, the projects constructed roads and buildings. So the government kind of took a two kind of faceted advantage of the Great Depression. They got going on a lot of infrastructure projects that they wanted to get going on for a long time, and they also used these projects to help people just find jobs and get employment. So it was all around better for society, even though some of it, you could argue, was sort of useless and it was just arbitrary to get people back in the workplace, but that's a discussion for another day. National Recovery Administration, the NRA, this is not like the National Rifle Association, don't get that confused. Agency that reformed capitalism to rid it of its abuses of the lower classes. It aimed to put forth government regulation on labor and business. It introduced wage controls and price controls, although it was eventually ruled unconstitutional. This is an example of FDR and just the national government as a whole really overstepping its authority, putting a lot of national control and influence onto the economy. This is where the conservatives and a lot of conservative historians start to push back on FDR with acts like these that were really just far beyond the national government's power and reach. And you can argue if it helped or if it didn't help, but that's just the reality of it. Agricultural Adjustment Act, the AAA, bought off farmer surpluses and paid farmers to not overplant in order to bring up the prices of agricultural products. This provided relief to the struggling farmers impacted by the Depression and the drought/dust bowl. So this is another arbitrary government intervention on the economy. They bought off all the farmers' extra crops that people weren't buying just because they didn't have the money to buy crops anymore because of the Depression. So this sort of helped the farmers market, but the government was just buying all their crops and then basically leaving them to just rot and go to waste. And they also paid farmers to not overplant, just to kind of reduce the supply of farmers' goods, just to raise their prices back up to help the struggling farmers' economy. So all in all, just the government sort of play to just uplift the agricultural economy that was really struggling. Securities Exchange Commission, the SEC, enacted government supervision on stock trading and securities trading to regulate speculation and risk, and also eliminate fraudulent trading practices. One of the things that finally implanted the Great Depression on the economy was just the stock speculation and the stock market failure across the population in America, so the SEC was just designed to make sure that didn't happen again. Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, this sounds a little bit irrelevant, but it actually is pretty important for some APUSH questions, just in my experience. Led environmental projects mainly consisting around the building of dams, which provided employment for the unemployed, created electric power, and controlled flooding and other climate disasters to help farmers. So this is another example of the government kind of capitalizing on the Depression to get things they wanted to get done and they also use that to just employ the masses. The government took control of land to promote better agricultural and industrial practices. Social Security Act, SSA, this is highly relevant, especially now that it's sort of failing at this point in the country, but again, that will come up in very, very like the last chapter, I think. Provided government checks to suffering old age people through payroll taxes. Social Security eventually expanded to provide relief to those suffering during and after the Depression. It was highly controversial. Why it's controversial is because young people have to pay into it, and that money goes to old retired people who need the money to just live their final years of life. But why it's so controversial is not only is it's just a government bailout program, which a lot of people just don't stand for, but also as the country grows older, there's more people taking out of the sort of supply than the young people that are paying into it. So it just creates this negative sort of account, and there's just no money left, and people have to start accepting less and less payments, and it's just not gonna work, and that's actually a crisis that the country's dealing with now. National Labor Relations Act, the Wagner Act, established the right for private employees to organize into unions and protest through strikes and sit-ins, so just a labor movement sort of work in and tie into the New Deal stuff. The right to undergo collective bargaining balanced the power between employer and employee. Fair Labor Standards Act, law that established a minimum wage and overtime pay. It also eliminated child labor, so obviously some labor union stuff, labor goals stuff in this, but also the goal of just getting more money into the people's pockets through their wages. This act ensured that workers would have more rights in the workplace to uplift their standing in the economy and reduce capitalist abuses. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next chapter, and goodbye.